I'd like to welcome you to the Meets Legislators session 2011. And first of all, I'd like to thank the sponsors. The League of Women Voters, the Evansville Teachers Association, Valley Watch, Plumbers and Steam Fitters, Teamsters Local 215, Sustainable Communities Coalition, Isaac Walton League, the Evansville Vandenberg Public Library, and United Neighborhoods of Evansville. I'd like to thank our sponsors for making this possible. We do have a couple of things to kind of explain how we do this. Of course, I'd like to thank you guys for showing up and thank our legislators for being here. We do have some refreshments. There's a couple different kinds of coffee and some pastries over there. Please feel free to help yourself to some of those. There's also a couple of donation jars to help pay for those items, so if you'd like to participate in that, you're more than welcome to. If you'd like to be notified of these events via email, we have a sign-in sheet, should be out in the hallway. Just put your name down and crisply put your email address down, and the only way we will use that is to notify you of the two remaining events. But so if you like that notification, please sign in for those notifications. The format that we wind up using for these events is we'll start with each legislator separately getting 3 minutes. That's not 3 minutes for all of the legislators, that's 3 minutes each. So they get 3 minutes each to kind of update you on their activities in Indianapolis. Once that happens, then it's your turn. I'll call on people from left to right in a random kind of way, semi-random kind of way, and we'll just keep going back and forth. When I call on you, we'll ask you to come up to the microphone up here on the left, and essentially you'll have 2 minutes to ask a question about some current legislation or that's moving in the House and Senate right now, or something you want to see happen with legislative matters for the state of Indiana. Then, once you do that, the legislators each will have a couple minutes each. Again, that's a couple minutes each to respond to your question or your comments. And let me jump back a second. Before they start responding, I'll ask anybody in the audience if they have a different take on the same issue. If somebody does, we'll hear that for about a minute, and then we'll go into the legislator's response. I'll indicate to you, or try to, when you got about a half minute left, and you need to kind of start wrapping up when you got a half minute left. We're going to wrap this whole thing up at 11 o'clock, and we'll ask you whatever you get in your chair, whether it be a coffee cup or a napkin, to please, toward the end, before you leave, just take it back over there, and there's be trash cans or someplace to set it. The library does have a policy of no weapons. So in case you came in here this morning with a weapon, you need to please take it out, lock it back up in your vehicle, and then you can come back in. But you're not forced to do that. You don't have to lock it up in your vehicle and come back in, but you do have to take it out. So if you take it out and you don't want to leave it out, then you need to stay out with it. So anyway, that's important. That's a rule that the library has, and so we'll ask everybody to comply with that. To contact your legislators, there's a couple of ways to do that, toll-free by telephone. If you, on the House side, the Democrat House phone number is 1-800-382-9842. The House Republican phone number is 1-800-382-9841. And the Senate has one phone number, and that is 1-800-382-9467. You can also email, which I highly recommend, and it's fairly easy to do that. Each of the representatives and senators here today, you can see their district numbers. You can see the outlines of their district to find out who your rep is. But all you need to do, if they're a senator, put an S. If they're a member of the House, put an H. And then put the district number down, and then the symbol @ and in.gov, and that will get you an email to them. If you want to explore government, just dial www.in.gov, and that will get you to the Indiana State Government. If you want to go right to the legislative site, you can just type in Indiana General Assembly, and you go to the Indiana General Assembly site, and you can look up your legislator or find your legislator from there. So that's how you can be involved in doing stuff. Okay, with that said, we'll start with the reports from Indianapolis, and this time we'll start on the House side with Representative Bacon.
Reports from Indianapolis. It's still there. So I want to thank all of you for coming. I have House District 75, which consists of a lot of the west side of Evansville, the middle of Evansville, west of Vanderbilt County, a little bit of Gibson County, the Hopstad area, and west part of Warwick County. We've been very busy getting a lot of legislation through, but it can't, I don't want to bring up anything special because that's what you're here for. You're here to bring up especially what you want and what's been going on. Some of the bills that I've been working on are tax abatement and for farm equipment and other things that aren't in the possible tax abatement system that we're working on right now. Mark Mesmer has a similar bill which we've gotten through and is on the going to the Senate side to take care of that, to try and help with job creation and also help our farmers in keeping their family farms and doing that for them. So we're doing that. That's one of the most important things we've been trying to do. There's been a lot of bills go through this last week concerning job creation. People were saying, well, you're not doing anything for jobs, but it said it takes time to get legislation through. So this week we did get a number of bills through that worked on that, and that's one of the things we were working on. We were happy to do so. So the rest of it, I'll just wait till we get questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Representative Crouch.
Good morning. I apologize for getting here a little late, and I am going to have to leave a little early because I am honorary chairman of Girls in Bloom event, which is at the center taking place today for middle school girls. I got home last night because Ways and Means met yesterday and passed out of the Ways and Means Committee 1001, which is the budget. And it's really interesting to me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the budget, but the most interesting thing to me is nobody's focused on the budget because everybody's focused on all these other issues and all these other bills that are going on, whereas the budget is the most important thing that is going to happen to Hoosiers. We did pass out a $28 billion budget, a 2-year budget for the state of Indiana, and that's relatively what it's been for the 2 years prior and the 2 years prior to that. So we are working and doing what we can with not any increase in revenues. Revenues are ticking up somewhat, but still, in 2013, we're projected to have the same revenues that we had in 2008. So that kind of illustrates where we are with the whole financial picture. The budget that we passed out did have some cuts in it that were different than the governor's budget that he presented to the House Ways and Means Committee. There were 3 important things that this budget did. It has a structurally balanced at the end of 2 years. It has a savings account of 4.2%. Now, typically they project that you should have a 10% savings account at the end in the budget for the biennium. We have a 4.2% savings, which kind of again illustrates where we are fiscally. And this budget does not have any tax increases for Hoosiers. I think it was a good budget to pass out. It is the beginning of the process. The governor presents his budget, the House Ways and Means. We go ahead and pass our budget with changes. It goes to the floor of the House. There are amendments that change it again. It goes over to the Senate. They repeat the process, and then it will go to conference committee where it will change again. So I want to stress that if there are changes in that budget that affect you or the groups that you're involved with, you need to let your legislators know, and you need to let them know why it's important that changes are made as the process goes through. We tried to do the best we could with what we had, but I'm looking forward to your input and want you to recognize we're still at the beginning of this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Representative McNamara. Yeah, there you go.
Good morning. And again, thank you for coming today. I appreciate hearing from you. This week, several things that I was the author of made it through committee and actually made it through the House. One bill that'll be interesting, especially David Coker if he's out there, is 1004, and what that is gives everybody access to state financial data. It's a work in progress, but every state institution will have a common Excel document, for lack of a better word, that anybody can go to and access state funding data line by line. It's been a process that's taken about 3 years to get to this point. We're still working on it. I believe it's up on second reading, and next week we should be looking at that bill and making sure that all of our state institutions can be readily accessed by the public, and you can look and see how they're spending their money. So that's a very important bill in talking about transparency and where your money's being spent. Up on Monday will be a third reading of my bill. It's a school funding bill. And what that bill will do is give or reauthorize school corporations the ability to use their capital projects funds and transfer a certain amount of those fundings over to be used in the classroom. As well as we add an amendment on Thursday that'll again reauthorize the 5% and 10% transfer that schools are accustomed to. And that'll be up on third reading. Schools need that so that they can be able to, weather some of the storms coming their way. The other two pieces of legislation that passed the House for me this week, I authored a bill on credit time. What was happening is inmates received credit time for receiving high school diplomas, and a lot of them were using a loophole. They were sending out and purchasing high school diplomas and trying to, hand them to the Department of Corrections and say, here, look, I need a year off my sentence because I now have a high school diploma. So what I did in this bill is force them to have those courses approved by the Department of Corrections and the diploma accredited by the Department of Education of the state that it comes from. That'll close a loophole, and it will truly address the needs of what it was intended to do, is give these people who are in jail the skills they need to survive when they get out, and that being in education. And then the last thing was a child protection registry. This will be like a do not call list, but it'll be for parents to place their child's email addresses, eventually their instant messaging and Facebook on a child protection registry, and they'll be able to protect them from, for lack of a better word, spam coming in that has pornography, gambling, or just about anything that could be harmful to kids.
Thank you. Make a quick announcement. We still have some chairs up front. Last time I'm going to mention there's empty chairs up front. So if anybody wants to take advantage of those, now is the time to do so. Now we have some takers. That's great. Thank you. Next is Representative Rican.
Thank you. This past week, of course, was a real fast-paced week, long hours, long days. Able to get some amendments on the floor, but not necessarily in the bills. Some of those amendments were on competitive bidding, utility regulation, who's your worker preference, and we had other issues about tax credits for small businesses and putting more money into small business loans, which didn't fare very well as some training initiatives for workers on the job. I continue to work on bills that, with folks, as well as have some of my own. The one is the drug nuisances that neighborhoods were very, very concerned about. That bill has gone to the Senate, working with another Republican, Milo Smith, on a moped bill, trying to have a little bit more accountability there. In the neighborhoods, we have had some crime having to deal with we buy gold places, thieves stealing things and then taking them to those we buy gold places. They're melted down. We need increased regulation around the state because they're melting it down before the police can get there. That bill was killed in committee. Hope to see it revived at some point in time. I want to let you know, just for your information, hope that you all will be back. I think information about what's going on in our state is really critical. And at 12:30 this afternoon, the League of Women Voters is hosting a charter school forum. It's going to be right here. Marianne Sullivan, who is a Democrat and is pro-charter school, will be here. Pam Decker, head of the Joshua Academy. Keith Gamble, who is here, is president of ETA. Larry Grau is with the Democrats for Education Reform. Vicki Snyder, principal of Signature School, and Patty Swanson, who's on the EVSC board. It's really important we all learn about these issues. We've got a week coming up that's going to be critical that folks get out the vote. I'll be doing a press conference a little bit later about the importance of calling your representatives regarding bills that are hurting Hoosier workers and the kids in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Senator Thomas.
Well, I won't talk real long because I want to get right into question and answer. I bet you all do too. Okay, thank you. I'm probably violating dress code here today. I'll explain that. From here, I'm going to a farming operation, and it's been my experience that livestock don't much care if you're wearing a tie or not. They'll slop it on you regardless, and so, and I may have to leave early for that, but we've got we too in the Senate side have been real busy, and the bills are really piling up, and you don't just get a little stack of bills. I mean, you get stacks of bills. And I've been trying to read not just the synopsis on these things, but all the language that is in it. And it is tough because sometimes you don't have these bills quickly enough to where, as they're being described or they're discussed, you're trying to catch up with the language in that bill and also be ready for the next one that's going to come up. So it's pretty intense right now. I think I'm putting about 13, 14 hours in up there, and I'm not complaining. I'm just explaining. I signed up for the job, and that's what it's about. And I'm not going to get on a bus like Wisconsin and head out of town. I'm here to stay for 4 years anyway. But on some of the criminal code stuff, that's some major stuff we've been working on. We had a lot of testimony. We had days back to back on criminal codes. They're in the process of changing the way Indiana designates what constitutes Class D felonies, maybe bump them back down to Class A misdemeanors. It's obvious that, and I've always felt this way, that we've got way too many people in jail. And since I've been on this committee, it's come to my attention that Indiana is the strictest of all 50 states on criminal activity. And we have the highest incarceration rates. And our sentencing periods are much longer than other states. So it's no wonder we're out of prison beds. And so I'm glad that we're in the process of looking at this here, and but it's very interesting. We've been having some discussion about Sudafeds, ephedrins. Some want to take it off the market entirely. Some want to make it a schedule so that you'd have to go to the doctor. I'm not in favor of making a person spend another $20 or $30 for a copay just to get your cough medicine. But what was curious about all this, all of the testimony we had about Sudafeds and the methamphetamine problems, we had a bill that came up in the same day about legalizing marijuana. And it's just funny how things rotate around. But and you can draw conclusions on that however you want. Also on the utilities, a lot of discussion about utilities on coal and nuclear power. Fact of the matter is, we're going to have to look at perhaps building some nuclear powered facilities in this state. I mean, that's some of the things that's been brought up. EPA has brought a lot of mandates down on these utilities. They're struggling with to attain to those designated mandates. I'm not here to make a case one way or the other, but I do know that it's something that we're going to have to make decisions on sooner or later. I think that the coal-fired utility plant in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, could maybe have to shut down because I don't know if they're going to make the standards on what's mandated on them. I want my power to run. I want my lights to come on when I flip the switch. But there's a lot of discussion in all these matters, and sometimes what might seem like an easy decision to make when you hear all of the input and all of the different arguments, those that oppose to it, those that support it, makes a big difference. And sometimes it's tough to come up with a decision on it. So there's a lot of things to weigh in on. But anyway, that's about it. There's other things that I could discuss, but maybe we'll probably come across them during the question and answer thing, so I'll let go at that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next is Senator Becker.
Good morning, and I appreciate all of you being here this morning. As Senator Tom said, we've been very busy in the Senate, and a lot of people will say, well, you know, have you seen House bills? Well, we haven't seen House bills yet. I think there's one that's on second reading. But most of them we have not seen yet because we're so busy doing our own bills. I did want to, because I know at our last meeting we had several people here talking about retirees and the fact that Indiana does tax pensions. And I have a flyer back there for those that might be interested. There's also another flyer on brain injuries. We passed a bill that will set up a commission to look at brain injured people in the state of Indiana, because we're currently spending $11 million to send those people outside of the state. But getting back to Senate Bill 39, it is a study, and it requires the state's Tax and Fiscal Policy Commission to look at the issue of retiree benefits and whether or not Indiana is losing retirees because they go to other states because their pensions are not taxed. And in fact, I had two people that contacted me and said that they actually keep their kids live here. They would like to live here, but they keep a home in Kentucky because the taxes, Kentucky does not tax pension benefits. And so I think it's something worthwhile for Indiana to look at, because senior citizens contribute an awful lot of money, revenue stream, to the economy. And so I'm very pleased that that bill has passed the Senate. It's gone over to the House. I've also working on a bill regarding domestic violence, and basically there is a fatality review teams that look at homicides, and in the case of domestic violence, we passed a bill last year, but there's been a misinterpretation that they couldn't look at the victims. They could only look at the offenders because they didn't want them interfering in a so-called investigation of a homicide. So we're changing that this year so that the fatality review teams can also look at the victims as well, because that a lot of times you'll end up with a suicide as a result too of domestic violence. There's a couple of other changes as well. And then a bill that deals with HIV testing, and it's really for pregnant women. Currently the law is in Indiana, if you want to have an HIV test, you have to sign off on it in writing. But Riley Hospital has seen since 2008 a 400% increase in HIV cases in babies. But what we know with science is that if you treat a woman, if you find out while she's pregnant that she has HIV and you treat her during her pregnancy, you can reduce the odds dramatically. In fact, you can reduce the incidence down to only about 2% of babies will actually have HIV then when they're born, if they are treated during pregnancy. So this basically, if they don't want the test, they can say so in writing. Otherwise, they can give their consent for the test either orally or in writing. So that's a change, and that's Senate Bill 581. I've also had another bill that is on third reading for this week, and it deals with senior citizens and counseling options, so that when someone leaves a hospital, before they go to a care facility, they know the options available to them in the community. Work that out with the Hospital Association as well as our AAAs. And so it's very important so that they have choices on where their care is going to be delivered. And so I'll quit because I know that you all have a lot on your minds as well. But thank you for being here.
Thank you. And now it's your turn. What we're going to wind up doing is I'll go from side to side. I'll ask you to step up to the microphone. Suggest that if you have written comments, to submit those as well. And you may do that later via email to all the legislators. But I'll let you know when you got about a half minute left. And please keep your remarks to one issue. So we'll start this time on this side of the room. See, a hand went up right here real quick. Yes, sir. Please step up to the microphone and state your name, please. And then you can get into your issue.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Ray Chatton. I'm a farmer actually from Knox County and a Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor. I represent Southwest Indiana for our state association. My concern is with the recently passed House budget and its reduction of Clean Water Indiana funding by $500,000 per year. Currently, Clean Water Indiana funds leverage close to $96 million of federal conservation funds for Indiana. Those funds not only benefit local economies, they put conservation on the ground and benefit our natural resources. I am concerned about the capacity districts are going to have to deliver the education, the technical assistance, and the program administration that is necessary to put these dollars on the ground and improve our environment. I'm strongly urging on the House side that we amend HB 1001 to restore that funding. And I would invite comments.
Thank you. The issue is supporting and restoring the Clean Water Indiana funds. Is there anyone that has a different take on the same topic? I see no hands, so it's now responses from legislators. Representative Crouch.
Thank you for being here. It is the beginning of the process. Most state...
Lever forward. It's on? Okay.
Thank you. Anyway, it's no surprise that some people did experience cuts. I mean, very few received additional money. I can't, off the top of my head, think of very many at all, if any, received additional money. So thank you for being here, and we'll just have to see as the process moves. As you well know, the budget did move out of Ways and Means, and now is the opportunity to amend it and make changes in the Senate. So thank you for being here and bringing it to our attention.
Thank you. Other responses? Senator Thomas.
Ray, just a question. Doesn't the clean water, don't they get some funding from the tobacco sales taxes in Indiana?
It's a dedicated fund. Cigarette tax is all the money we've ever had, and that is a diminishing fund, as you well know. There has never been an increase, and it's getting harder and harder every year for districts to find the means. And we've also been dealing with local funding issues. A lot of counties don't consider SWCDs an essential service compared to fire and police, and it's a double whammy to have this state decrease along with what we're facing at local levels.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other responses? Senator Becker.
One of the things that you might consider doing is if you have the figures on how much that money, that $500,000, if you can get that to legislators, how much that will allow the state to leverage federal dollars, if at all.
I have that.
Okay, because I do think it's penny wise and pound foolish for the state not to take advantage.
It's a 30-to-1 ratio
of federal dollars,
yes.
And you make up that in no time. The other thing I would say is that, as Representative Crouch has indicated, this is just the beginning of the process. We're going to be there for 4 months. We're going to be looking every month at the revenue forecast to see whether or not revenues are improving, and so far they have been, but not by, again, we're still at lower levels than we were in 2008, so keep that in mind, but we will be continuing to look at that. But I think you might want to just send an email to all legislators and outline what the match would be from federal funds.
Thank you. Other Representative Crouch again.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. Most state agencies are funded about 15% below what they were, and there were 3 exceptions to the cuts, and one is Medicaid. They're actually those are line items we have no control over. Medicaid, pensions, and then the Indiana Comprehensive Insurance Plan, which is an insurance plan for Hoosiers that cannot get insurance from any other insurance companies.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to another issue. We're on this side of the room. I saw a hand go up over on the side, and yes, that's you. Please step up to the microphone and state your name, and you can get into your issue then.
Hi, I'm Bob Mills, and I'm here to talk about Senate Bill 56 and House Bill 1226. I noticed that Senator Becker has signed on as a co-sponsor. I applaud that. No one else is sponsor of these bills. They should be. You're going to hear what they are.
There you go.
Many unlicensed ministries are dreadful places for children. I know unlicensed child care centers for the state for 20 years investigated complaints at ministries. One ministry kept children in chairs all day. When it came time to eat lunch, they brought washcloths to the table to wash their hands. I saw infants asleep in high chairs because they were kept in chairs all day. This is not against the rules. Although some unlicensed ministries are good, many are terrible warehouses for children. Indiana allows an individual with no child care background, no church, no congregation to operate unlicensed registered ministries. Ministries can put as many children in a room as they want, follow any discipline policy they want. Unlicensed registered ministries follow no child-staff ratios, have no age or education requirement for staff, have no equipment guidelines, even in regard to safety. They're not required to follow the same fire safety rules as licensed centers. Many ministries are fire traps for children. The Perry Preschool study shows that children that attend high-quality programs have significantly higher lifetime earnings than other children. They have significantly higher percentage of home ownership, have significantly fewer births out of wedlock, have significantly lower contacts with social services, significantly fewer arrests, are more likely to graduate from high school, have higher literacy rates, have significantly fewer divorces, and are less likely to need remedial education. They do significantly better on testing.
Time's short.
Pardon?
Time is short. You did.
For every tax dollar spent on quality child care, there's an economic return of $17 based on crime savings, welfare savings, education savings, and increased taxes. Indiana doesn't support child care. Indiana has a voluntary system called Pass to Quality. 476 of the 593 licensed centers are working on Pass, and 18% have reached the highest level. Only 30 of the 741 unlicensed ministries are on Pass, and 0 of them have reached the highest quality.
Okay, thank you.
One sentence.
One sentence.
Yeah.
A short sentence.
Please support these two bills. They are not a budget item. They actually increase taxes that come into the state.
Thank you. The issue is supporting Senate Bill 56 and 1226, opposing unlicensed ministry child care centers. Is there anyone that has a different take on the same issue? I don't see any hands, so now it's responses from legislators. Representative Rican.
Thank you. It looks like 1226 didn't get a hearing. That was Representative Lehman. We were just looking it up, and I think the best that we can do is encourage Senate Bill 56 and perhaps, nope, not either. Didn't get a hearing either.
It got a hearing.
Got a hearing?
No vote.
No vote. Okay. It's an important legislation. We need to do more. We need to do better. Work on it.
Thank you. Other legislators? Senator Becker?
Bob, I appreciate you being here. We did hear that bill on Wednesday in Public Health, and unfortunately, there were people there, even licensed ministries that were there in support of the bill. We have one right here in Evansville. Methodist Temple is a licensed daycare center, and they actually embraced the path to quality, and there were ministers there in support of this. This bill was not a takeover by any means. It was just basic health and safety standards for registered daycare ministries. But unfortunately, it was met with a lot of opposition. We could have passed the bill out of committee. We had the votes, but the chairman decided she wasn't going to take a vote, and that's her prerogative. She's from Indianapolis, and there were an awful lot of ministers from Indianapolis that were at the hearing. What could still be done, even in the House and in the Senate. Usually, if a bill doesn't get a hearing in the Senate, you cannot revive that on the floor. That's the chairman's prerogative, and you just can't get around it. In the House, they have a little more flexibility where they can do amendments, even just amend parts of bills, part of that bill into another bill. I mean, I just think that for children's sake, we should have at least minimal standards for anyone that is taking money. And these ministries get almost $30 million in federal dollars in child care vouchers from the federal government. So, you know, sorry, but you're already involved in government when you take those dollars, and this just would have put basic minimal health and safety standards in place, and I think it's a shame, but we will be back at it again next year in the Senate, and they might still be able to amend something in the House.
Okay, thank you. Senator Thomas was next.
Well, I just want to say, Bob, I wasn't involved in that, but I did have lobbyists coming in on that subject. And hearing the stories that you're talking about, you know, there's got to be something done. And I just hope maybe that next go around they can phrase the language too, so that those that oppose it will understand it, you know, what the intention is here. Like I said, I wasn't involved in it, but I just heard a lot about it. So it's not that it didn't go unnoticed.
Representative Bacon was next.
I'd like to say we'll look at it and try. We didn't get a chance to hear it because, like I said, we just found out that it didn't get out of committee, so we've never known anything about it yet. But we definitely, in the House, will look and see what we can do if we can do that. Since most of us here are freshmen, we're not real sure what the system is at this point, so we'll figure it out if we can. But even if we don't and we're not able to, stay on message on what you're doing. Contact the other legislators and that, and you know, for next year is another time, and we'll continue to look at it. We need to continue on these types of issues, keep the pressure on it, and understand why they're not wanting to do it when we have an issue like this. So we need to find that out and fix it to where we can. So we'll work on it.
Okay, thank you. Other representatives? Senator Becker wants a last.
Well, I just wanted to say that we had testimony that this one woman went into a daycare, child care ministry, and there were 47 kids in one room with one person under the age of 18 supervising. Now, if you had a fire, what are you going to do? There is no way humanly possible. And so I just think it's unfortunate. And we said, well, maybe we need to define what a ministry is. Well, the ministers there don't want you to define what a ministry is, because I could go out under current state law and set up my own ministry and register and start taking kids if I wanted to. And I have no training in daycare. So it's an issue that really needs to be addressed. And I think that until we get more grassroots support out there for it, and let me tell you, there were lots of people there. The United Way folks were there in support. A lot of the past equality folks were there in support. I mean, we had overwhelming testimony in favor of it, but it's unfortunate that it didn't get a vote.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to a next. I'm sorry, Representative Crouch.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I don't have any. I don't have any comments to make on that other than, you know, hopefully next year was another year. But I wanted to make two comments on that were brought up last time. One on the horse racing. Some lady was here talking about the horse racing subsidy. $58 million is subsidized to the horse race industry. Last year, that was cut down to the budget to $27 million. And I also know someone brought up about the universal carding, where everyone has to be carded at liquor stores, and legislation passed through that has dropped that age to 40. So any of you that look under 40 will probably continue to be carded. So thank you.
Okay. That was a little sneaky. That was a little sneaky. I'm going to have to watch that. Sneaking around. Okay, next issue. We're back on this side of the room. See a person standing up over there? Yes. Please step up to the microphone and state your name, please.
Yes, my name is Michael Flake, and I'm a public school teacher, and I'm speaking regarding the school vouchers. I haven't even said anything yet. Okay, here we go. I'll make it quick. Unfortunately, the ideological battle between politicians has boiled over into our public schools. Schools have become the battlefield of belief, with students and teachers becoming the casualties of war. The polarization we see in today's politics has now spilled into our schools. Teachers have argued for years that our schools have been neglected and more attention needs to be paid to the issues we face in our classrooms. Unfortunately, the responses we are seeing is a further erosion of the educational system that has helped build this great nation. I would argue that the true measure of our school success lies not in a standardized exam, but in the wealth and prosperity of our country because of and not despite of our public schools.
You're chewing up his time.
I'm trying. One of the principal arguments put forward by school choice proponents is that charter and private schools do better than public schools educating our youth. This is simply a fallacy. The University of Southern Illinois compared more than 340,000 students using math scores from the National Assessment of Educational Progress. They found that adjusting for socioeconomic factors, there's little difference between private and public schools. I got to cut to the chase here. Regardless of the private versus public mantra, a more profound and damaging movement is a shift towards allowing free market forces to enter the educational system. The belief is that free market forces will improve public school outcomes, especially in our most disadvantaged schools. Early research is proving this hypothesis false. Competitive forces are causing talented, highly qualified teachers to leave our most vulnerable schools. In a free market system, the schools that can provide the highest paid, quality work environment and opportunities to meet expectations are attracting and retaining highly qualified, experienced teachers. This effect, seen by NCLB with punitive measures, is causing quality teachers to leave our inner city schools.
Timing.
If we do not, I'm to the end. If we do not find common ground and work in substantive ways to improve education, we will simply continue down this road of self-destruction and further erode the public system of schools that we've created. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. I'm gonna Will you give me some regular coffee? I thought he'd have time to do this while everybody was clapping, but I was too late. I'm going to take that as opposing school vouchers. Does anyone have a different take, like an opposing take, on the same topic? No guts, huh? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Next, it's time for thank you. It's time for responses from legislators. Senator Toms is first.
So you're a little undecided on this matter, huh? Folks, I got to tell you, as a freshman legislator on this, and this has been discussed, we've had more talks on this, and I wasn't involved in the bills on these things, but just in the discussion about it. I've had meetings with teachers last weekend up at Posey County. I had a meeting last night with some of the teachers here in Evansville. I had one teacher was gracious enough to call me to come to my house last week and sit down and walk through some of this subject matter. I've had emails and phone calls on all sides of this thing. And from my standpoint, I'm just going to be honest with you on this, I feel like I've been thrown in the middle of this thing, and I'm uncomfortable because there's just so much to consider. These bills, these education bills are huge. They're moving way too fast. I don't know how much pressure I'm going to come under up at the State House on this thing, but at this point right now, I'm just reluctant to vote in favor of any of these things because I'm just afraid we're just moving way too fast. I didn't go up there to make folks mad at me, but I did vote against some of the individuals, and some people would really take it to heart, and they let me know right up front about it. But you got to do what you think's right. And in this thing here, there's so many people that I've talked to, the teachers, that's given me their presentations, the folks back home that's emailed me from their homes. It's just way too much to take in at one time, and to run this thing through so fast. I'm just not happy with this. I'm just not comfortable with it. I'd like to see us just pull back on this thing, regroup, take it a little piece at a time, you know, rather than taking this whole monster at one time and pushing it down the road. So that's my position on it. I mean, the teachers I met with last night and the ones last weekend, you guys make good points, and I can't appreciate what it is to be a teacher. I mean, one of the things I see here is it looks like we're trying to fit this thing for everybody in the state. It just won't work. Marion County, they got their problems. Other parts of the state's got their problems. We're down here, we're pretty good shape from what I see. And try to gear this thing to fit everybody, you can't do it. You just can't. And I know they got the best of intentions. They're trying to fix things, but there's a way to do it and do it right. And you can also do it wrong. And I'm afraid the way we're going about it right now is the wrong way to do it.
Okay, thank you. Other legislators? Representative Cross.
Thank you. It is a very difficult issue. I quite honestly am undecided on it. And let me tell you what, when I make a decision, it'll be as a result of the input of my constituents. It'll be as a result of the input from people that I trust, that I don't believe have an agenda. And I don't cave in to pressure from the State House. I think you all know that because of my authorization or authoring a bill fighting the administration on the welfare modernization. But I want to know that ultimately the decision I make is best for our Hoosier families and our Hoosier children. I think it's pretty telling there aren't any choice supporters in the room. And shame on them.
Thank you. Next is Representative Rican, then Representative McNamara.
Thank you. There are some bills that are coming up this week, and I think when Senator Becker talked about the best thing that we can do is show grassroots support. And folks need to think about these bills that have to do with education and make phone calls to Indianapolis. And again, I know you'll speak of the number again, right? You'll tell them the number again. Do I need to do that? It's 1-800, there's two of them, 1-800-382-9842 or 9841. One of them is a Turnaround Academies bill. That's $14.79. It's basically taking a couple hundred failing schools in this state and making them independent, separate corporations. I call them government-run, privatized schools. Another one is the vouchers. You've heard about that. And the other one that really concerns me is 1584. It's an education deregulation bill. And it's a common theme that I've heard. And it basically says that school boards can waiver out of almost any school laws and regulations. Now, all of this is being set up for what I would consider as a supplemental system to public education. Need to be aware, study the bills, 1479, 1003, and 1584. They're on the hot box this week, and we need to see that they are defeated.
Thank you, Representative McNamara. Representative McNamara is next, and Representative
It's kind of interesting being in my position. Those of you that know that I'm in public education. I get a lot of phone calls from both sides on just about every issue. And my friends in public education in some ways look to me to be the savior of trying to help out on all these bills, and I'm willing to do that. But my concerns with that, I've taught with a lot of you sitting in this room. I've worked and coached with a lot of you sitting in this room. What I want kind of echoes what Representative Crouch talked about. I want sincerity from you. I don't want to cut and paste from ISTA. I don't want facts and figures coming that were handed to you that have changed from the day that bill was first written. I want sincerity. I want you to understand what those issues are you're coming to me about. Not because somebody has told you, not because somebody has told you to say this way. I want you to read the bill. I want you to understand the bill. I want you to know the amendments that have been attached to these bills. I want the sincerity to come from you. I do not want to cut and paste. The majority of the emails that I receive are cut and paste.
That's not what we're sending out for people to do.
What I'm asking is just, I'm asking for your thoughts and your concerns and how you feel about these things. And that's what I'm asking for.
I spoke from my heart.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Legislator time now, please.
Thank you. I do have concerns about the scholarships. My concerns range from the attention of who it's intended to help. There are students out there that if you give them the ADM, the $6,000 or $7,000 that it costs to educate a typical student, where do they come up with the difference to pay for those additional monies at those schools? And if those are the ones that we're truly trying to help, it's not going to be helped by a voucher. It's not going to be helped by that money going there because they can't afford $70, let alone the $700 that might be the difference. So there are concerns on that, and they range around the financial. My decision-making process will always be what's best for our kids in the state of Indiana. I spoke with the superintendents of Posey County this last week, primarily because they took the hardest hits in this community on the budget. Like Representative Crouch said, there's still a lot of financial issues that will be looked at, amendments that can be had, estimates that are in that bill right now that I'm going to work for when I get back to try to make sure we can try to help out those communities that are taking severe hits financially.
Thank you. Next is Representative Bacon, then Senator Becker.
I want to reiterate, I agree with Wendy and most of the ones up here. I have really taken an initiative after 2 weeks ago when the first bill came up to make it a point, because education, as I said, I always told everybody during the campaign, and is the one thing I know the least about. Although I spent 24 years coaching at the high school level, I did not do any educating at the high school level or elementary level. And so I'm spending a lot of time working really hard. Probably half of my time right now is being spent on education bills. I met last Saturday with the educators in Warwick County, made it an open forum, and there was at least 100 of them there, the teachers. We had an excellent day that day. It ended up, I expected a couple hours, and it was 3.5. And they had tremendous issues, and I had tremendous questions to ask them, and they did a great job asking them. I've met twice with the superintendent and his staff at Warwick County. I yesterday met with the staff, the superintendent of South Gibson. We had the forum in EVSC at the Technical Center that Speaker Bosma came down and Bertram was there. We had a number of the private school people there, and we've had tremendous discussions on the bills. So we're looking at them. We're having another teacher, Representative McNamara and I are meeting Sunday afternoon at Gibson County School Corporation in Fort Branch and talking to those teachers. We want to make sure that everybody gets to speak and that we get a chance to speak to them. That's our job, and that's what we're looking at, and that's what we're finding out. So I agree with your intensity here. We're going to look and see on these bills and what we feel is best for the child and what we can do. I'm very afraid with what's happening with the whole system, and this is my real fear. I'm a product of the parochial school system, 12 years, and I feel I did pretty good. So my mom made the right decision of sending the 3 of us to the parochial school. But that's not for everyone. And we did it without a voucher system. It was that decision. I sent both of my daughters to public school, and I had 2 tremendously well-educated, one with a finance master's that came through the public schools. I do not want to take a risk of doing all of this so fast, so quick, without looking at it, that maybe it's a good thing for some people, but what is it going to do to the public school system? And my public school system, the only thing I can speak to are the 3 schools that I represent, and I'm pretty proud of all 3 of them. And I tell everybody in Indianapolis, you got problems, why don't you come down and see what we're doing, because we don't have yours.
Okay. Thank you. Next is Senator Becker.
Thank you. I do have a handout. In fact, there's a map in the back. This came from the Department of Education. One of my fellow senators received it on Thursday. And it has, I asked Tony Bennett, our superintendent of public instruction, because in his narrative, when he has this narrative out there supposedly talking about all the education initiatives, and he says we have 1% of our schools are chronically failing schools. So I emailed and asked what was his definition of a chronically failing school. And he said 1%, but I still have a legal and moral obligation to those students. You know, it's kind of like they've taken a shotgun, or a sledgehammer, where they could have used a scalpel to try to help schools that are failing. And this is their map. And I have copies back there. I probably don't have enough for everybody here, but what I will point out is that there's only one failing school south of Highway 40, south of Marion County. According to their information, this is DOE, and they're listed on the back, and a lot of those are also charter schools. And some folks think it's not fair to compare charter schools, but let me tell you, charter schools are set up with independent school boards, and they are set up as an independent school corporation. And 21 of the 25 lowest scoring schools are charter schools in the state of Indiana. And again, I want to share with you that this is DOE's information. The ones that are in orange are charter schools. And here, look at the last page. 25 charter schools are actually under 50% passing ISTEP in the state of Indiana. So I just think we need to be very cautious when we go in these directions. And really, this is an Indianapolis problem. It's all of this is being led by Indianapolis, and when Indianapolis sneezes, the rest of the state gets a cold. And I'm also concerned because, you know, the governor has already last year, he cut $300 million from public schools. And we used to, when Bob Orr was governor and we passed the A+ program, it was supposed to provide accountability and remediation, helping kids, finding out where their problems were so that we could truly address those kids that needed extra help. And we passed the money at that time to include remediation. Well, now we've taken that money, just last year, $45 million, $37 million of it was spent on testing. $6 million has only been spent on remediation of our kids, and yet we're complaining that they're not doing well enough on a statewide basis. And I just think that we need to get our priorities together and really look at what's good for kids.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Very brief last comment from Representative Rican. Very brief.
I wanted to bring up a couple of things that there was a request, or there was some comments last time about the Catholic school, the parochial school system, and there was a gentleman here, two gentlemen from Memorial that were advocating or wanting to advocate vouchers in that regard. There are some interesting things in this bill, and that's the specifics they're talking about. You need to look at the voucher bill that will not probably not be beneficial to the parochial schools in the long run. I do have a letter from someone who is a parent in St. Andrews in Indianapolis. They actually went to the charter system. They were parochial, went to charter to get that money. They no longer teach religion in the school. You need to be careful when the dollars start flowing to the private schools or the public schools of what you can do and what you can't. Also, House Bill 1003 requires that you are in the public school system 2 semesters prior to if you want to go into the parochial school system. That means that kids that are in the parochial school system right now really aren't going to get benefit of those vouchers. So what's going to happen to those kids? Do they then take second second level to the kids that have the vouchers and can come in now. There are some issues that really need to be discussed about parochial school and protecting the religious Catholic schools, and I think it needs to be discussed by those institutions to know really what you mean when you say you're in support of vouchers.
Okay, thank you. It's time to move on to the next issue, and we're on this side of the room. See a gentleman right up here in the middle.
Truly school reform, and it has happened through our collective bargaining process. Our district has been recognized by the United States Department of Education, the Indiana Department of Education, the National Education Association, and the Indiana State Teachers Association. And just this week, we were one of 150 school districts from across the country that were recognized for our efforts in management and labor relations. Pending legislation does not seek school reform. It is out to demonize and demoralize the men and women who are in those classrooms doing the work for these children every single day. Are we to apologize for collectively bargaining protected planning time? Are we to apologize for collectively bargaining a right to equal voice at choosing textbooks and school curriculum? Are we to apologize for collectively bargaining fair and just due process? These items do not affect the district's bottom line, but they are greatly impactful on the work that we do in our classroom each and every day. Are you willing to sacrifice the success that this district and the districts around us have shown through the collective bargaining process at the jeopardy of losing all of that success to fix something going on in Marion County? Thank you.
Thank you. You timed that yesterday, didn't you? You had 2 seconds left. Nice job. The issue is supporting collective bargaining for teachers. Am I right? Yes. Is there anyone that has a different take on the same issue? I don't see any hands.
575.
Did you have a different take on the same issue?
No, I was just wondering what the number of that.
Okay. Okay. The responses from legislators. Representative Crouch.
I'll go ahead and respond. I really am not familiar with the bill, other than Randy Head, Senator Head, and I sometimes walk together from the Columbia Club. I'm not even sure what's in it. I know that what I've heard is that it pertains to wages and benefits and not to anything else. I don't know if that's true or not. I know there's been a lot of amendments. I know they've changed it quite a bit. I heard there's a 60-day kind of provision in there, but quite honestly, I'm not real familiar with the bill because being on Ways and Means, I've been pretty focused on the budget, and we pay attention. There are so many bills out there. There's over 1,000 bills in the House. We pretty much pay attention to the House bills, and the Senate kind of pays attention to the Senate bills, because the Senate bills, from the time they are filed to the time they reach the House, if they reach the House for consideration, will change tremendously. So I appreciate your input, and I look forward to hearing the details when it makes it over here. Perhaps one of the two senators can explain to those of us in the House what it looks like right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next was Representative Regan, then Senator Thomas.
Thank you. Perhaps I should wait till I hear about that bill, but I do want to tell you there's a couple bills in the House right now, again, that we need to hear more about from you all, and one of them has to do with the right to work for less wages, I call it. That is the one that makes it illegal for an employer to require an individual to be a member of a union and pay union dues. I think what we need to do is to stand up and say that unions are beneficial. They are beneficial to collective bargaining. Collective bargaining provides a good living wage for folks, and that's what we need to have. House Bill 1585 is the state civil service, and it's another assault on unions. It makes it illegal for state employees to collectively bargain or to strike. Folks, it's time to stand up and send your word to Indianapolis.
Thank you. Okay. Next is Senator Thomas.
Well, I believe Senate Bill 575 is up for third reading Monday, and I come from a labor background, and I'm on a Republican ticket. You won't find that too often. I think my background helps me have some perspective on these things that when they come up, and I understand that collective bargaining is an important tool for labor in all levels of employment, whether it's teachers or industrial jobs, those types of things. Again, I've read the language of the bill. I've heard the discussion about it. I've talked to the teachers about some of the items that are still kept in the collective bargaining. Then I've read some of the things that's been moved out of that to what they call discussables. I'm a little concerned that you can discuss something, but if you got no power to make a change on it and have a wording, why discuss? I mean, if somebody's going to tell you, well, we're going to do what I'm going to do, but if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. I got to tell you again, like I said, maybe everybody's got good intentions in all this, but from my standpoint, I just want to reiterate, I feel myself that I've been thrown in the middle of something that's been put together by other people, and I'm asked to vote on it. And I'm not comfortable about voting on things that I wasn't part of as building it and putting it together. And that's why I still stand by my position. So I fully understand your concerns about the collective bargaining. I got concerns as well about it. So just for what it was worth.
Thank you. Last call for legislators. Senator Becker.
I think, again, Senate Bill 575, I don't think that in this last campaign I heard one legislator running for office campaign on that issue, or the issue of charters, or the issue of vouchers. Not one legislator running for office campaigned on any of those issues, and I do think that a lot of this stuff needs to be further looked at. And I think, I'm aware of the equity schools here in Vanderburgh County, and that was done with collective bargaining, and teachers made sacrifices to lengthen the school year, lengthen the time on task for students, and putting a plan in place that would not have been possible. And I share some of the same concerns Senator Tom's talked about. When you say discussable, and I've made this point, what good is it to discuss if you're just going to tell me that you're going to do what you're going to do anyway? So, some amendments, one positive amendment that was put into Senate Bill 575 that's not in the House version. House version is much more draconian, if you will, because it does not have binding arbitration. And Senator Luke Kinley did offer an amendment in the Senate to add binding arbitration, which would help, because then both sides would have to make their best case, and then binding arbitration would decide. The binding arbiter would decide. And I've talked to. I haven't heard from our local superintendent one way or the other about this issue, but I do know. In Warwick County, I have heard from Brad Schneider, superintendent there, and he is adamantly opposed to this bill. And so I'm keeping that in mind.
Superintendent of Mount Vernon.
Are you too? Good. But I'm just very concerned that we're, again, taking a sledgehammer to an issue that needs to be looked at more with a scalpel.
Thank you. Time to move on to another issue. We are back on this side. I see in the middle here, 4 rows back. Yes, please step up to the microphone and state your name, and then you can go with a brand new issue.
Greg Richmond, Warwick County. You may think I'm talking about teachers, but this time I'm not. I'm also a county councilman, and this probably is directed to Representative Crouch and the rest. We in the county work real hard to stay within our budgets, and we've done a good job in Warwick County, and we have managed to accumulate a little bit of capital in the savings side. We've done what we're supposed to do. Now I receive word that this new budget says the state, which collects your income taxes from your paychecks, and also when you do your tax at the end of the year, they take all that money up there and then they distribute it back out to the counties. We have what is called an economic development income tax. and that's the tax we use to build roads and to help bring businesses to the county. Well, we have a budget for that too. And now I just read in the paper and found out that the state says, whoops, we misfigured. We sent you too much money. Now you pay us back right away. That's about like me telling my daughter, I gave her a 1% allowance. She's going to get married in June. Whoops, I forgot. I was giving you 1.5%. Give it all back now. What do you think?
Thank you. I'm going to take that as you don't want the state to abscond with local money. Probably not the best way to phrase that, actually. Should have done a little bit better job phrasing that. But does anyone have a different take on the same issue? I don't see any. Now responses from legislators. Representative Crouch, then Representative
Thank you.
Bacon.
Actually, I want to respond to that because it's not quite as onerous as you have portrayed it today, Greg. And that may be because it hasn't been conveyed very well what's happening. Any income tax, whether it be COIT, some of you are COIT counties, some are Cadgy counties, some are CETA counties, that money is actually distributed to the counties, excuse me, and it's based upon what was collected 2 years ago. It's kind of like assessed valuation. If you're familiar with assessed valuation, have any of you, like in the past, I remember getting calls, I don't understand why my assessed valuation's gone up so high, because the market isn't high right now. I mean, I'm sure some of you have experienced that. Well, that's because assessed valuation is actually what your assessed value today is what was sold 2 years ago because of the length of the process it takes to actually figure it out. Same with the credit, the income tax. It's actually based upon what was taking place 2 years ago. So, and your collections or your payments 2 years ago were based upon what transpired 2 years before that, and it's all because of the lag time and the reporting process through the Department of Revenue. They have made many attempts, the legislature in the past, to try to figure out how to make that better. In fact, there was an amendment to the budget bill that wasn't called down in Ways and Means yesterday, but I expect it'll be called down on the floor, that has some merit to it, and that is to make monthly reports to the county as to their income tax, collections, so that they can plan better. The problem we have here is that you all, the counties, were paid too much money based upon that 2-year lag. Now the state is saying we need to collect what was overpaid to you. And the schedule on that is really, I believe, a 4-year schedule to try to recoup that money from the counties. Everybody recognizes it's just unfortunate, and it's just bad for the counties because they were overpaid. There is legislation, there is in the law, where if the state underpays the counties, the state actually has to repay it that very year or that next year. And that actually happened when I was a county auditor. The state had underpaid us, and they had to turn around and give us what they owed us the next year so that we knew for the budget cycle that that was coming. There is nothing in the law, there's no provision that says we got to collect it in a year, we've got to collect it back from you in 10 years. So the plan that has been put in place is to collect those monies that it owed the state, that they overpaid to the counties, over a period of 3 to 4 years. I wish it were different, Greg. I recognize the position that puts you in and it puts the other counties in, but also I know I was pretty happy when I was auditor to see us get money that the state did owe us. So I know that's not the answer you want, but that's kind of explaining the process.
Thank you. Next is Representative Bacon, then Representative Regan.
I just want to, normally I wouldn't do this, but since Mr. Richmond and I have known each other for 35 years, and I do know his daughter who is getting married, and I do know her very well, and I know she's much higher maintenance than 1% of his salary, or his salary is much higher than I expect it to be, and as a teacher. So I am going to look into that. And so I really want to let you know that for sure. Thank you, Greg.
Okay. Next is Representative Regan.
Thank you. I don't know if I can top that. But you were talking about absconding with the money on a state level. But there are a couple issues regarding absconding local control that I think are important to talk about here. One of them is a bill that's coming before 1538, and it will make it illegal for local government to establish a minimum wage rate higher than the state minimum, which is $7.25. So if local government wants to establish a contract and they want to establish a certain minimum wage rate, and they feel that it should be $7.30 and not $7.25, it will make it illegal to do that. I think that's overreaching. The other one is House Bill 1216. There are public works projects that have public project labor agreements. There's one on the arena, I'm sure, here. There's been on other arenas. Their opportunity, in particular, for women and minorities to gain opportunity in large contracts. It's been a great way that small business has grown in the state of Indiana. And this particular bill will tell local government that they are not going to be able to require those project labor agreements with union workers. And I think that again, is overreaching in control of our local government. So I thank you for speaking up, Greg.
Thank you. Other legislators? Senator Becker.
I really wasn't going to speak on the issue because I think Greg ought to get all the money he wants, but but I did actually Representative Rican brought up a point, and in the Senate we have Senate Bill 333, which deals with project labor agreements, and for those of you in the House, this might be helpful to you or not, but the Senate author has left his bill. In fact, he killed it on Thursday because he doesn't have the votes in the Senate to pass that bill. So you might that was 333. So you just might keep that in mind on the House version as well.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to next issue then. We're back on this side of the room. The lady right over here in the corner. Please step to the microphone and state your name, and we can go with a brand new issue.
I don't know how much good this microphone's going to do me. Can you hear me? First of all,
step a little closer to it, please.
First of all, let me tell you, don't start the clock yet.
I've been caught.
First of all, let me tell you how impressed I am with the fervor of this audience, and in particular the teachers. Of course, all of my teachers have gone to the principal's office in the sky by now, but in their place, let me extend to you my gratitude for a good education. You all deserve whatever you can get. But that's not the subject I want to talk about. I would like to call your attention to another important matter.
Your name, please.
My name is Joyce Taylor. I am addressing the devastating cuts that the Daniels administration has made to the developmentally disabled citizens of this state. They were talking earlier about Medicaid receiving no cuts. Understand that Medicaid and Medicaid waiver are two different things. Medicaid waiver are services provided to the disabled that allows them to pay for support services so they can exist in the communities as opposed to being institutionalized. Recently, through a grid published and distributed by the state, it is learned that the state intends to drastically reduce Medicaid waiver service hours. The state devised this grid by placing each disabled person into one of 6 categories. Each category has a shallow description of an individual who belongs in each category. Each category the state then determines what they believe to be the needs of a person with the disabilities described in each category. Then they assign an arbitrary number of service hours to correspond with each of these 6 categories. Now, I know that's convoluted, but stay with me. This number of hours is often drastically less than the number of hours that a care team and family members who actually know the disabled person had previously decided upon. Furthermore, we are led to believe that this new allocation is a cut and dried decision, and most appeals to the state will be fruitless. Understand, up to this point, it was the disabled person, their family, and an independent caseworker who determined the number of hours necessary to ensure the health, safety, and inclusion into the community of that disabled person. Now this important decision has been passed to a nameless, faceless, unreachable committee who only have paperwork and check boxes from which to make their decision. To add to the situation, previously the disabled had advocates in the person of the Medicaid waiver caseworker. However, Governor Daniels privatized that system and hired a company to direct and oversee these new caseworkers. The notion of there being advocates for the disabled is no longer true. They are simply employees of the state facilitating the orders of the state through this private company. The disabled and their families no longer have any advocates to represent their interests other than any elected official who may take an interest in their case, and thus my reason for being here today. I ask that each of you, if you are not already, become steadfast advocates for the developmentally disabled and their families, and push back on this continued effort to underserve the most needy and deserving citizens of our state.
Thank you. The issue is closing cuts for the disabled. Is there anyone with a different take on the same issue? A different take on the same issue? I do not see any hands. And now it's time for responses. I'm sorry. Yes, please come to the microphone. A different take on the same issue.
Question.
You've got 5 seconds.
What bills, other bills to help our mentally ill have, I know, Ms. Becker, you've been working on some.
Okay, we'll get into that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Responses from legislators, please. Senator Becker.
We had a meeting right before the election. It was in November. Well, it must have been the end of October, with Evansville ARC and advocates from not only Evansville ARC but Posey and Warwick County as well. And they brought up the fact that about approximately $300 million over the last year has been cut from developmentally disabled for services. And so I took that information back to the administration and asked them to please look at that. Was that true? And what they did say was that it wasn't true because part of the dollars were supposed to be initiatives that the state originally wanted to expand services, but they don't have the money to do it. So I looked at that and kind of subtracted that out of the $300 million, because if they were, wanting to do this, but now because of the state's fiscal condition, they don't have the dollars, then how much of it was really cuts versus what they originally wanted to do? And it's still about $250 million over this last year. I brought that up in discussion. We have a bill in the Senate that deals with FSSA, and it deals with some of these programs, and it gives it's some of the tools that the administration wants, but it also changes the First Steps program for those of you that might be familiar with that. Although, in all fairness, Connie Lawson, Senator Lawson, is an advocate on behalf of the developmentally disabled. She's really trying to save the program by carrying the bill that she's carrying. And she did come back with an amendment so that the co-pays were not going to be as high. Part of the problem is that people that are eligible for these programs are supposed to pay co-payments. And they're very minor, but if you have a child with special needs, it's very expensive to get the help that they really need. And so some of them have been remiss in paying their co-payments, and this is putting a little more leverage in there. But I would encourage all of you to send letters and emails to the governor's office about this issue. I think he needs to hear from the people that elected him as governor. And I know, the problem is that we have more needs out there than we actually have dollars to support all those needs, and it's very difficult decisions. But we can leverage federal dollars with those state dollars, and in fact, they have cut the budget. If they would put in another $3.2 million, they could leverage about 15 or 20 million from the federal government. So again, I think we ought to be doing those things that help us to help people.
Thank you. Next is Representative Regan, then Senator Tom.
Just a short comment. I think we all attended that meeting, and it was a dramatic reading, a testimony from folks there who were feeling that the loss of these dollars and what they were very concerned about in the future. And I think, again, first steps is so important. Early intervention is definitely a savings in the long run, a savings of dollars. And I think we can continue to look at that and impress those who are making the decisions about the dollars to put the 3.2 back in, to put that in. And that's another call. I don't know the Senate bill number.
It's the budget bill.
It's the budget bill itself. So we'll look at it. But that's another reason to call Indianapolis and let folks know what you think.
Thank you. Next is Senator Thoms, then Representative McNamara.
Yeah, I was at the ARC meeting as well, and I've also met with a lot of other groups around Evansville, Youth First organizations that work with the children, and you know, everybody that's been in my office over the past several weeks and months, and the groups I've met are concerned, whether it's public broadcasting, everybody's worried about the budget cuts and shortage of money and how they're going to be affected. And I, just for what it's worth, brand new to this business and trying to learn my way through it, but I want you to know that I hope that I can help in these matters, try to at least ease the pain on some of these cuts and how it's going to affect all these different organizations. And I've just been experimenting. I tried something a couple weeks ago. The Harmony Park in Posey County. There was a group of folks that go camping there, and they had concerns about the park, and it's some of the playground areas is down and in bad repair, and they was wanting to see if the park couldn't, come up with some money to fix that and address some of those things. And the parks are just like everybody else. There's just no money, and the managers have tried, but there's just no money. But I tried. I thought, well, let's just see what we can do. And so I called DNR 2 weeks ago, and I had the fellas come in my office. We'd done a little talk, and I asked them, I said, that they're not asking for the stars and moon. They're not wanting to build anything new. But if you could just maybe give us a little consideration. If you can come up with some money or find a little money, I know they'd be grateful. Well, they called me this week, the DNR, to tell me that they did find $25,000 for Harmony Park. Now, thanks.
That's kind of sneaky, getting that in.
Well, that's my commercial. But for me, it was a lesson that, if you're willing to get out there and maybe hustle it up a little bit, you can do things. And I'm only telling you this because of your concerns here. I just want you to know that I'm going to see what I can do. I'm not making promises here, but I want you to know that I'm sure this is for everybody, that we're doing our best to see if we can't ease the pain for our area of the state, that they don't take a hard hit. And just so that you know that maybe it's not easy. Maybe I just got lucky, but I just want to throw that in there, okay? It was my one commercial. I'm entitled.
That was sneaky. You learned the ways of Indianapolis fairly quickly.
I'm working on it.
Next is Representative McNamara.
Thank you. She was mentioning Senator Lawson. Senator Lawson has asked me to take on a pretty big project, and that is her attempts to, for lack of a better word, fix DCS. And I'm learning from the top to the bottom about how all that works. And for lack of a better word, she's asked me to become the advocate for children on the House side. And with that, an advocate for families that have children with disabilities. I'm climbing a steep hill and trying to figure out, how all that works. So let me know what I can do to help, amendments I can add to this bill she's asked me to take on, assuming that it passes through. It's about 76 pages long, and there's a lot of a little light reading, but there's a lot of things in it that should help our families in Indiana, should help our children. But like I said, it's something that I'm getting a course in every day. So please let me know more about it as I begin to learn and grow with those issues, specifically with the funding issues that are addressed to it and the tribulations you have to go through to get your monies that you need. So please keep me aware and let me know, and I can try to massage the bill to the best of my abilities.
Thank you. Next is Representative Bacon.
Just to answer to your question, and we'll look into this, and we haven't seen the total budget bill yet. We just know it just came out, and we've seen some things. But I was told that choice and the waiver program was not cut out. Now, as I said, we learn a lot of things that we're told, and we don't see it, and we've got to wait till we see it and so forth. So we'll definitely look into that, because that sort of made my day when I heard that, but now you're bursting my bubble there. And so we definitely will look into it, because I don't like to have my bubble burst. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're back to last quick word. Senator Becker.
I was just going to let Representative McNamara know that bill number is 465, and it's passed the Senate. And in fact, that's where my domestic violence fatality review language is in as well. So appreciate your willingness to help on that. And also just to say that choice was cut. Choice dollars for home health care was cut. Part of the problem is that now the state has said that they can take half of the money in choice and use it for waivers. And choice is different than what you're speaking of. You're speaking about developmentally disabled. Choice is home health care for the elderly, but it also includes the disabled. And but if they go to waivers, they get federal funds. And so they want to use more money for waivers, but the problem is it actually costs the state more, because once an individual is eligible for the waiver, they're eligible for all the medical health care that the state offers under Medicaid. So it actually costs them, in choice, it's about $7,000 a year for someone to stay in their own home with choice. It's about $50,000 a year for someone in an institution, a nursing home. And so, but the language that they want to do is get them more federal dollars, but when they do that, it's really penny wise and pound foolish, because it ends up costing the state, for someone on a waiver with those medical care, about $31,000 a year. So keep that in mind, that there still needs to be some work done on the choice. And the funding for DDARS, they could pick up federal dollars if they just put like $3.2 million back in it. They cut their funding.
Okay, thank you. Need to move on to the next issue. We're on this side again. See your hand right up here in the front. Please state your name and quickly get into your brand new issue.
Yes, my name is John Blair. I'm from Evansville. I'm here to speak about, I guess as a bill, it would be Senate Bill 251, which is a bill that declares nuclear energy and coal-fired power plants as renewable, which is kind of bizarre in and of itself. Neither one of those things are renewable at all. But on a broader issue, this Senate Bill 251 allows utilities to spend as much money as they want, get their hands in the ratepayers' pockets to build nuclear plants, to build coal plants, or whatever they decide to do with it, with almost no oversight. It's similar to what's happened with Duke Energy in Edwardsport. The Edwardsport power plant was originally proposed in 2004. They were talking about $1.2 billion with carbon capture and sequestration. Now it's $3 billion, and it has no carbon capture and sequestration. And all that money, a good portion of it, the money that's already been spent in building that plant, is already in Duke's rate base. And that's what 251 wants to set up for nuclear plants and other things. Had that been around during the Marble Hill fiasco, we would have had a $20 billion nuclear plant. And Senator Toms, I think that whenever you look at nuclear or clean coal, you're talking about the most expensive energy on Earth. And I don't know why people that call themselves conservatives would want to strap their constituents with these massive utility bills, which are nothing more than a phantom tax. It's a way that the state can do its funny business and end up taxing people through the utility companies, essentially. The IURC is a rubber stamp for the Daniels administration. The Office of Consumer Counselor is a rubber stamp for the Daniels administration. We have no representation on those things. Rockport, the plant that they want to do in Rockport, is requiring a federal loan guarantee of over $2 billion and $6.9 billion of your money that you're going to be forced to pay because of a contract where the state became the market. And these people call themselves conservatives? That's the most socialistic thing that I've ever seen come down the pipe.
Timing is short. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. The issue is opposing Senate Bill 251, which is defining nuclear and coal as renewable and the funding for those types of plants. Is there anyone who has a different take on that same issue? A different take on the same issue. Seeing that, it's time for responses from legislators. Senator Thomas.
Well, John, I tell you what, I've heard a lot of testimony on these utility measures, and everybody comes up and brings good points to the thing. My concern was about how the ratepayers affected on these things, where they're putting these rate charges in place before even the project's done or even studied, and I'm real concerned about that. But then also, I just want to keep in mind during all of this debate on what we're going to do in the future for utilities, we've got to keep in mind that there's a lot of power that comes into play on all of this. You have the coal industry. I'm just going to tell you, I support coal. It provides a lot of jobs, and coal energy provides us the comfort of our homes. We set our thermostats in our houses. We watch TV. We do a lot of things that with the electricity and the heat. That does not mean that I forget about the folks like myself that pay those light bills. I want to make sure that there's always some protection on that, and I'm real concerned about all that. But there are sometimes extremes on the other side too. It's been testified about the regulations that the government has imposed on these utilities. That's a hard bullet to swallow too for some of them guys. The other thing about the development of nuclear power plants, sooner or later we're going to have to come to the realization we're going to have to do something different because there is a limit on these resources we have, and nuclear power it's been improved a great deal. And just listen to some of the discussion and some of the research I've done. It's a huge improvement from what it once was, and it would be cheaper utilities. The construction of these facilities provide a lot of jobs. If we want to draw the line, I draw a hard line on future developments, then we're going to say the construction, I'm sorry about it, but we're just going to not provide those jobs for you. But just for what it's worth, there's been debate on both sides of this, and everybody's brought good points. At the end of the day, I guess we're going to have to make a decision on what's best. But one thing we've got to keep in mind is we're going to have to address the facts of life, and that is that there's going to be changes be made on how we get our our energy to our homes, and that's indisputable.
Thank you. Next is Representative Regan.
Thank you. I think it's a bigger issue too. It's the whole one about IURC and making sure that people that are there in that Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission don't have those relationships with folks they regulate. So that arm's length transaction, as well as making sure that the IURC is excluded from any of the deregulation bills that have come up. And we all have to watch. 1130 came up this last week. We voted on it. And I did have a couple of amendments that the author didn't accept. But I think that he did change the bill to recognize that we could not include IURC in that deregulation opportunity. And I think we need to consistently do that with every bill. Our charges here, our costs, our rates in southern Indiana are the highest in the state. We really need to be careful of that because it not only is hard on those of us as citizens, but it is an economic development issue. If we're to attract business here, we must be competitive.
Thank you. Other legislative responses? Representative Bacon? Oh, okay. Other legislative responses? Senator Becker.
I think that Senate Bill 251 is on the calendar, and I can't remember if it's on second right now or if it's on third, but one of the things that it does is it allows utilities to have what we call trackers, and I know John's familiar with that term, but I'm very concerned about the ability of utility companies to raise rates without hearings of the IURC. They can just go in and recoup their cost with trackers, and there's all kinds of trackers, which is outside the regulatory process, unfortunately. They come in every year with more bills for automatic rate increases. And at one time, I mean, I can remember when we had Sigico down here, our rates were the lowest in the state, and now, you know, now that we're a veteran and we've been, you know, they were changed, we're now at the highest. We're now at the highest rates in the state, and that is alarming. I'm going to look at that very carefully. I know that there are benefits, and I do support clean coal technology because we have an abundance of coal in Indiana, and we have coal mining jobs as a result of that abundance, and that will help in the future with the cost of energy in the state of Indiana. But I'm very concerned about this particular piece of legislation just because I think it allows too much outside of the regulatory commission.
Thank you. Last responses from legislators. We are on this issue. Okay. Okay. We are almost out of time. We got about 5 minutes left, so we're going to be in a position where we're going to try something, and I need your cooperation. We'll try one more issue. And I saw a hand going up. We'll try one more issue. Come on, step up right now. Here's the deal. You don't have 2 minutes, you got 1 minute.
Okay, I'll go quickly. I'm Tom Kilpatrick, superintendent of Mount Vernon School. I am a public superintendent. I'm opposed to vouchers. I'm opposed to anything.
Let's go to the microphone.
I'm Tom Kilpatrick, superintendent of Mount Vernon School, public school. I am opposed to vouchers, and I am opposed to anything changing collective bargaining. But here is my question today for everyone. Mount Vernon and the community schools around, I'm attacking, or not attacking,
Got to wrap this up in about 15 seconds.
About the new budget, it hurts community schools. I heard Mr. Bacon talk about community farms, family farms. I heard Mr. Bacon talk about small businesses. The way it is set up now, it hurts our community schools. And our community schools are going to end up being into forced consolidation if we keep going into this direction.
Okay, thank you. Half a second response from opposing comments. We've got a very short period of time, and I'm going to cut legislators off, actually, if it requires that. Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Tom, and I'm working on it, okay? 2 things I'm going to address, like I said, when I get there on Monday. I want to know why the small schools grant and the restoration grants were cut. I don't know why, and I started to ask Suzanne because she might have known. She started to tell me, and then we had to start this whole thing. So I want to try to see what we can do to get those restored because my guess is one is probably over $100,000 for you to your schools. So that's what I'm going to do on Monday. The other big thing is making sure my legislation gets through over to the Senate and gets approved to give you that flexibility with your CPF. And we're not done trying to get that flexibility for the silos as well. But that was taken out of my bill. But more than anything, I want to check on those 2 grants to find out why those were cut and try to get those restored for you.
Thank you. Quick comment from somebody else? Quick comment? We're going to be out of time then. Representative Bacon.
I just kind of wanted to be last for a purpose and a reason. this is the best forum we can have for these issues, and we need to continue doing this. I really don't think this is done throughout the rest of the state the way we do it here, and we truly appreciate it because we have the opportunity to talk to you. You get together and have the opportunity to talk to us. We make that available throughout our districts, and we talk to our other people, and we really, really do appreciate it. What I want to caution a little bit, and all of you, is continue to do this and don't end up like Wisconsin. Now, I don't say if I agree or disagree the whole issue's up there. That's got nothing to do with it. But I do want to tell you that that can turn other people off who aren't doing what we're doing, who are just not talking to their constituents, not having this conversation. And that can happen. So please, if the issues get to a boiling point and so forth, remember what you're doing. We're there for a reason. If they are attacked, some of you feel how you think you're being attacked, and I don't disagree with that. But if they're attacked, then you know what's going to happen, how they're going to feel. It's very difficult to make an informed decision if you feel attacked. So this is the best way we can do this, and it's great, and we love it up here, and we want you to continue doing it. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Quick final comment on the issue from Senator Thomas.
Well, he just covered. I just want to thank all of you for being here today, and it's nice to see this crowd. I'd love to see it just keep growing. Maybe we can fill the arena when it's built, and we'll do this there. Thanks a lot, folks.
Okay, thank you. Some final comments. Please take your materials, empty cups and napkins, over to the left and square them away. I do want to encourage folks to go to the Indiana General Assembly website. Menu is a drop-down list of bills. You can look at the language of a bill and its status. Our next event here will be in a month from now. Please consider attending that, and thanks again to the sponsors and to the legislators. Thank you.